Remember, this all started with a mild take, a very mild take from Ryan Kennel. That is my alarm. That's not anybody calling in. There we go. All right. What's going on, man? You're live.
Oh, hi. This is Eric, right?
Yes, this is Eric July.
Perfect. Hi. Or hey, everyone. I'm Andrew. Let me know if you guys can hear me okay. I don't have like a good setup. I'm just using my phone.
Nah, they can hear you coming in loud and clear. We see your audio and everything, so you're good to go.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me. Happy to have a discussion that isn't in front of a screen, sort of. I mean, even this is technically still in front of a screen, but
yeah, most definitely.
Just on Twitter.
Absolutely. That was kind of the whole deal here. I had already prefaced the audience about what's kind of happened. It's all stemmed from what I had said was my co-host of Tuesday night's main event, Ryan Kennel, and some of his comments in his review of the Batman, and some people take some issues with it, and I wanted to just give you an opportunity to kind of explain where it is that you're certainly coming from. You said that I was doing a bunch of deflecting, and now that we have you on, there's nothing that I could possibly deflect from, and if I did, it would embarrass me, certainly in front of my own audience. So I want to just go ahead and give you the floor and explain where it is that you're certainly coming from.
Sure, and I'm sure your audience knows of the whole situation, so I won't go into the whole background to it. But
okay.
right from the start, I want to say that I completely agree in which that any weirdo that is calling out for death threats or whatnot, it's cringe and it's disgusting. We don't have to do anything with that. I say we just ignore that. Nothing of that is ever accepted. I will say though that I do believe. I watched the whole review, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know how some people just watched that little clip or that snippet out of context. I will say though that clip and snippet, I would say it's controversial and it is mild. I agree. It is mild, but I'm a part of the camp that is saying even some of the most mild takes or some of those mild conversations still have a lot of power into it. And so in order for me to understand where you're coming from, fully understand where you're coming from, I think from some of the other comments that you were talking about, you were saying, and I don't mean to misquote you, so please tell me if I'm quoting you wrong.
Okay.
That you're saying giving them or reading into that, and especially coming from a white man, it means that we're giving them power into that just because we are reacting poorly or we're having a reaction at all to those phrases. Am I understanding you correctly there?
I'll sort of reiterate and explain. Well, a lot of that was aimed at a lot of the more so black folk that were in my mentions in regards to this. I've talked about this extensively, certainly on my channel, and I've talked about how a lot of these uber pro-black movements and organizations and institutions are actually institutions that do two things generally. One, beg for the acceptance of white people, or two, beg to the accesses of the resources of white people. And on the other hand, you have people such as myself, and I'm not the first one. I'm not the last, certainly won't be the last person that's done this. Point to folks like Malcolm X who had a similar approach, certainly in this regards, and was very critical of a lot of, again, black leaders and so forth in terms of their approach to this topic that we're talking about. And that is generally, at least this is kind of modernizing this subject matter in this case and making it unique to what's going on. But in this case, you have people that are attempting to give power, and they are, to this man. And who we're talking about right now is Ryan Kennel, who, he is a white person. But what happens is, in terms of their actual reactions, they assume, and I'll say wrongfully, despite Ryan being my homie, that this person has more power than what they actually is, and that they basically are the leader in any given sort of conversation. So if I, for example, and this is what has happened, say, well, this is a mild statement, and I explain exactly how it is a mild statement considering the context, and then the immediate reaction is, well, he's a coon, or he's some guy that hates himself, or something of that nature. It's important to add that, because what that does is, what it says is that you think that this person has, number one, that much power to be able to dictate and control the conversation as such, despite him just being a regular person. Me and Ryan are actual homies, like real life. I've met him on several certain occasions. I think he would agree that he does not have any sort of like power, certainly over me, and I have agency in this regards. But when you talk as if, okay, well, white man said this, and you get so emotionally distraught in it that you take something that is so mild and you make it to what it is, that what we had out of this Twitter spiel, you give them, whether it be unknowingly or not, you're giving them more power than what they actually have. So that's a more detailed version of what it is in the context of what it is that I'm certainly saying.
Yeah, no, I know. So for that matter, you noted a lot of things. So a couple of things to note onto that. I think the interactions that are on Twitter can sometimes be blown up. Let's take a tweet, for example. If somebody were to interpret a said tweet as an extremely passionate and that they're very mad or something, but in reality, they're probably just tweeting like on their break, means nothing really, right? Mm-hmm. So to say like people are taken to the extreme might also just be an assumption of what's actually happening. Now I know we're going off of just what they type, right? So, right. But it's all interpretive. It's exactly like when you misinterpret a text. Okay. Saying like, oh, this guy's super mad, but the person, whatever. But like, I'm also not going to assume anybody else is there. So if these people may be mad. For sure. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, we can't assume that for sure.
Well, I think it's safe too, because I'm gonna let you finish. I just want to just interject just real quickly. Yeah. Going to what you were saying initially, we can't leave out the threats and the like aggressive claims that people have objectively made in this regard. And that's all part of it in terms of triggering that sort of reaction out of people to that mild to what I feel is a mild statement. So, go ahead and continue. I just want to add that to it.
Agreed. That's like a psychotic take for that sort of thing. Or it's like, but a lot of the times, and much like we've seen in pop culture media, is that it's more than likely a loud minority. And so to say like, oh, that's everyone's giving them death threats or anything, I'm like, okay, that's a little disingenuous. But it is bad and it is terrible that there are people who are saying that, right? So now to go back to your point about his words and the power of his words, even though it's a mild take, I'm still on the camp that even if he has no power, right? And I'm not saying he doesn't have any power, but if he has no power, no audience, I still think it is worthwhile to be able to critique somebody, even if they say like the most mildest of takes.
I agree. That should be able to be criticized. I agree.
Reaction.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that's what, and I feel like from my perspective, from like the quiet majority, I feel like that's where a lot of the people on Twitter, and again, I'm assuming, but I'm just going to try and group the audience as much as I can. I think that's where a lot of the people take issue with. In this, we understand that it's a mild take. And that's what I tried to say in some of my other tweets before. He's definitely not saying the most racist thing ever, right? Or he's definitely not saying like.
But that's the complete opposite of what I think Twitter is. The people that we're specifically talking about are calling him, calling him racist. They call him KKK output. These are very egregious things that people are claiming in this regards, and this is why I talk about giving folks so much power, because that's a reaction that I feel, of course, is unwarranted considering how mild the statement was. And just for the context of our viewers here, we're referring to Ryan's statement, which in context is essentially, I'm going to break it down just really quick in terms of what it is that he was saying. He was saying that in this movie, in addition to the tokenization of and this, we use that term to talk about the race swaps of some of these characters, he's talking about how the black people that were in it were essentially seen as morally good people. The vast majority of all the white people, aside from Bruce and Alfred, were white. So think that that context is important to add, not just because of Ryan's statement and the reaction, but also with the times, and you consider what it is that we're talking about. That's something I believe that is worth noting, if you know, or worthy observation to have, certainly in this regard to that movie. So people that don't understand the context, that's sort of what that is.
Now, do you mind me asking you a question about him, since he's saying he's a personal friend? I don't mean to like ask you to read his mind or whatnot, but just sort of as an opinion sort of thing. Because where I'm coming from, the whole there's a couple more good guys that are people of color or black than there's a lot more white bad people. Mm-hmm. In the past movies, let's just take the Batman series. A lot, if not the majority, if not all, of the villains have already been white. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. That's where I was confused. I'm like, okay, wait. So does he want more bad black people? So I'm asking you, if you can somehow maybe I think your perspective on that.
To answer that, what's happening here is that you look at the times of like I think the short term history, let's say in the last 5 years, I think it's very, very important to certainly make note of and consider that in context. And when you see that, and I've actually talked about this before, like even with black villains, like they're so like outside of what like Black Mantis, like aside from that, really you don't even see black villains that are going to be, not anymore, you did maybe in the past, that are, let's say, villains. It's because they're scared to seemingly make them. And there have been a big hoopla for years, really for decades, that how black people are depicted in media. And maybe it's overcorrection, maybe it's not. That's for your own interpretation. But when you consider that, you know, what Ryan talks about a lot, what I talk about a lot, and more so in my case, I talk about tokenization more than anybody in this regards, and that social justice has been what has been amplified, or rather focused on, with these movies and how they cast people, the approach, and all of that. Now, I look to something in comparison. For example, I think this like everything's going to be all white. I forget what the actual movie or show title that Gothic, she had covered that. Our great friend Gothics had covered it, and basically is a foul show in context. I mean, I believe that you put the shoes on the other foot, that would be something that would be deemed as so racist that you could not possibly put that out. But because it's generally white folk, particularly white men, that it is that they are trying to degrade, all is good, right? Mm-hmm. So what Ryan is simply pointing out, considering the times, considering what we got, again, that context I think is very, very important, in that you consider that it is yet another example of, well, you got these black folks that are in there, they're going to be seen as morally good. But of course, if you're going to have who's going to be looked at as the baddie, in addition to Catwoman and her comments in the movie about white privilege, all that other nonsense, you have objectively, in this case, most of the people that are seen as bad are white. And I think that's something worth noting if you are, again, looking at this in context of this uber social justice bullshit that it is that we've been dealing with recently in the media. I don't think that's even something that should be glossed over. Now, yeah, you can look at it and say, well, that shouldn't matter. And I would agree. And honestly, I would think Ryan would agree. It shouldn't matter. But it does. And we can't remove the context if we are to have an honest conversation about this. Yeah, if we were living in a world where none of that crap mattered and they didn't focus on, in regards to the castings and in regards to the narratives that are being told in the story on race and all those other elements, then yeah, we wouldn't have to talk about this. But we do. We do have to, because that was the scene that was unfortunately set by really media in general, all the sectors of entertainment, with their hyper emphasis of social justice and all of that. I think that was just simply worth mentioning.
Yeah, and so I would go along the lines of, I don't think, especially like with the context, I don't think that this one. So now, okay, for fair warning, I haven't seen the movie yet. I'm seeing it tonight.
Okay, I haven't either, so that's fine.
No spoilers on that if you don't mind. Yeah. So no spoilers on that if anything else. But I will say that probably just based off what I've read so far, that this movie is one of the least proponents of the whole woke media and race switching, color switching characters. I feel like, well, because a lot of the times, and I know of the references you were talking about before, and I'm like, yeah, okay, you could definitely see that this is clearly just a money grab in order to switch over races. I'm like, oh, there is no real thought and or purpose in order to do this. This was just a, what do they call it? Virtue signaling, I think it's the word,
Okay.
or like some virtual signaling portion there. But in this movie, I feel like I didn't feel a huge shift in changing those characters or making it. I did not see I guess I just didn't see a huge difference in most medias. Like the people who they chose, the actors they chose, I feel like played their characters well, and that's all I really wanted. I'm not much of I'm a huge comic book nerd. I love all the comics, and I definitely know the origins and the original race that these were depicted as, these characters were depicted as. And I'm just part of the camp that, with Liberties, there's been dozens of reboots, hundreds of reboots, and hundreds of changes. And I'm like, with all these different media liberties, I'm just in that camp. Like, I don't really see an issue for, I guess, racial fluidity in these characters. So it was just weird to me, and it seemed very focused. He seemed very hyper-focused on that one portion. And I say hyper-focused very loosely because it was just like a 10-second clip in his whole review, right? But it seemed very weird that he docked points because of that. And so I was just like, that seems sus, that seems weird, and I don't really like where he's coming from there. And again, I didn't have the biggest reaction, but seeing Twitter's reaction, I'm like, wow, okay, some people are taking this a little too far, but I think their justification for it, or at least their original reaction, is valid, just not the fact of them going into the death threats, the violence, and whatnot. So, and calling the KKK and whatnot. I still think it's just problematic. It was mild, like you said, but it's still something worth talking about and worth critiquing, mind you.
Okay, which again, I don't think that this becomes what it is that it is if it was just a mild critique that was warranted. I think when you immediately jump off the deep end and start calling people these egregious claims, and I know these terms are used so loosely now, but this is why I often reject them. But they're used so loosely, but ultimately, if you look at what it is that they actually mean, these are terms that, I don't think anybody should just up and just be calling people just for the sake of calling them racist or, bigot or KK, saying they're associated with the KKK. These are very egregious claims, and people get beat up for less on a serious note. But yeah, I think with this whole, again, I think the times matter. And I don't even know because clearly when you consider what he gave the review, which is overall positive anyway, when you talk about docking the movie, he clearly didn't dock it that much. Me, I would have docked it wholeheartedly because I reject tokenism in its entirety. I believe that people are maybe people are softened up to it. And I think people that look at certain characters and they say, well, they can be any race and all of that, despite comic books being a very visual medium. So that's a gaslight at best when you consider someone completely changed to be something that it is that they're not. And then in this context, it absolutely matters because not only despite Eartha Kitt and what happened in the past, you look at this character and you already have Catwoman talking about white privilege despite her being race swapped. And I know it's not the first time, it doesn't change the fact that it is a race swap. That is worth mentioning. So I don't really agree even with the whole idea of this one, maybe in comparison to other ones, that it might be, I don't know, more or less, let's say, I don't know, I hate to use the term woke in its capacity, but, that's what people generally call it. I think it's among the same crap because much like they did with the, chick who plays Iris' father and the Flash, same thing. He becomes black out of nowhere, and he actually has a narrative, and he makes comments of him being exactly that. which makes no sense when you consider the context of the character. So not only did they change that character to be his race, they have the character make a statement in regards to that, which is a total swap. But nonetheless, nothing Hollywood does, and me and Ryan have talked about that plenty of times on our various amounts of shows, and that is with Hollywood, no casting is done accidentally. So when you consider the race swap of Jim Gordon, they set out to make him black, period. They set out to make Catwoman.
Oh, I don't know if I agree.
Well, it doesn't matter if you agree with it. That's a fact. Casting, no. They do not cast based upon. Hollywood does not cast, and I've been around many, many sets. I work with many people that are in Hollywood, between Matthew Marsden and Jacob Williams. When you cast somebody, especially some character that's already been done, you put out a whatever is a casting call per se. You say, we like this person. If you haven't already made them, if you haven't already had the character in mind or the person that you wanted the character to be, if it is a casting call, it's not a purely open one for a character as such. It's going to be, we want him to be around this age. We want him to be around this size. We want him to be this race. That is objective. That's not my opinion. That is exactly how Hollywood does, and definitely in this day and age, when you consider all of this hyperemphasis of race and all of that, and you can't even get nominated for certain awards, which I don't care about. They care about. You can't even get nominated for certain awards unless you have a certain amount of black people or a certain amount of this people that are on screen that are also part of your production team. Absolutely, that was done purposefully. Both of those tokenizations were absolutely done purposefully. Now, that doesn't mean, much like Idris Elba and his performance with Heimdall, although I'm not a fan, people tolerate it. But I don't think people tolerating or think, well, this person did a good job filling a role changes the fact that the character was tokenized. That doesn't change anything. Like that's still a statement of fact, even if you like that character. Go ahead.
So then, as a question to you, then, has there been an instance? Because to be completely transparent, I don't know the ins and outs of the Hollywood or the movie making industry. Right? I'm just simply the fan just talking about it. Do you have an instance where you can think of that could have been seen as tokenism, but you were okay with that because due to the full just craft of it, it was fine in your eyes? Do you have an instance that you can think of when that happened in Hollywood?
I don't think that there's an instance, definitely in the comic book sphere, where this is really where I focus, where I tolerate it. I'll acknowledge it, but I guess I'll tolerate it to a sense that I wouldn't, much like Ryan did, even if he makes note of it, that I wouldn't completely derail a movie just because this character was tokenized. It's something worth mentioning, and I don't tolerate the instance, and I will never make an excuse for it by any means. Again, going back to Heimdall. So I think, no, I don't think there's any instance because I think it's such a needless thing to do, but it's done so purposefully that I will never tolerate it under any given circumstance. I'll tolerate maybe the movie in itself, but I won't say that, okay, this was particularly okay. I think that's nonsensical. I think that's unnecessary. And I don't care where regarding the swap generally is. Right now, it's almost exclusively one way. Every now and then you get something like in New Mutants, which is generally a rarity, where a character that should be of darker skin tone is not. But I have an issue with that as well. I made note of that. But most of the time, the tokenism is going like almost 99% exclusively in this day and age one way. So I can't say that I'm okay with it. I'll make note of it and I'll say this is stupid, this is goofy. But yeah, there'll be other aspects. That's not going to be the only aspect of the movie. And I'll be like, okay, well, if the other aspects are good or bad. So even when for example, Marvel and I tokenized, and we consider those race swap, not just race swaps. We consider the gender swap, right? Yeah. All that, those are tokenization as well. What they did to Marvel was the most criminal thing that I'd ever seen done in modern comic book movie history. That was an insult as far as I'm concerned. But there were other things that I talked about that I had issue with that general movie. It's not the only thing that I would judge it, and but either way, I would never be okay per se. I would never use that term for something from some sort of race swap, even if the character someone felt that they did decently. Is just such an unnecessary thing.
So let's go back to the Jim Gordon, because I definitely know the Selina Kyle, from the quotes and from his review that I saw, like she brings up something about white privilege, something like that. So I definitely understand tokenism in that, because while she does in the comics then definitely talks about like the disparity between the rich and the poor and everything, the white privilege, I'm like, oh, that seems like a very big plug-in, you know?
Yep.
So I say if anything, let's not talk about that, but because then that definitely leads more towards tokenism.
Mm-hmm.
But where I'm thinking is more neutral is the Jim Gordon one. And so I know, and I'm going to trust you because, again, I know nothing about the film industry's ins and outs. So I'll trust you in there. And when they're talking about that, they sought after a black actor.
Yes.
I still don't believe that's necessarily a bad thing. Not saying that they shouldn't, not saying that they're overtly just trying to fill in the black, I guess, quota, if you will, for like whatever they're trying to go there. It's more like, I mean, he's still a great actor, right? And I still believe he portrayed it greatly.
Okay.
And with great care. So I am from the camp that I still don't believe that that's necessarily a bad thing, or that tokenism, if you will, is that toxic when it comes to that.
I mean,
so I wanted to get your more opinion.
Okay, well, like, to my knowledge, I don't know if he had mentioned anything in the movie regarding his race, in like with Jim Gordon or anything in terms of how he played. Now, either way, though, and there's been tokenisms and tokenization in which they haven't, like hyper emphasized, let's say, their race, or if there was some change of some sort, such as maybe, again, another example, that being maybe the latest with Jim Gordon. The problem that I see out of this is a couple of them, but yeah, it's something that is done purposefully, and yes, that is worth mentioning. I think that's totally unnecessary. Mm-hmm. But in the same respect, and this is the gaslight part of it, I think Lord of the Rings is dealing with this same issue. When you have something like comic books, which is actually even more unique than what Tolkien did, because his more stuff is more, novel based, just in the book. So even though he may have been very descriptive of how he defined who the character was, it was just done in words. Comic books are a visual medium, right? It's a visual medium. There's absolutely no excuse. And I think it's a gaslight for someone. And the gaslight isn't by the person that ignores it. The gaslight is by the person that is, or the attempted gaslight is by the person who assumes that someone either is in error or shouldn't be making note of or having issue or taking issue with a swap of that nature. When we have something that is specifically a visual medium and comic books, there is a completely realistic expectation for that person to cross over into, if they're going to make a live action and they're going to call that character, for that character to at least resemble who they are in the comic books. That is a perfectly rational thing. I think nowadays, because it's more normie-centric, comic book stuff and material and movies and stuff, they're more normie-centric. So they'll put a person there and name, and everything else is interchangeable. But for people like Ryan and people like especially myself, which I take generally more issue with this type of stuff than Ryan does, though he may of course agree with me on a lot of this, it's totally unnecessary. And considering that comic books are a visual medium, I have no reason to accept that. But I do think that I don't want to give them too much credit in the fact that they still did the tokenization and they went out of their way to do it. So it may have not been an open casting call, but in the same respect, they still sought the guy out. If it wasn't that, then they said, okay, we're going to pitch him the role. If he doesn't take it, he doesn't take it. But we're going to pitch him the role because we want him to be this guy who does not remotely resemble Jim Gordon in terms of how he looks. We're going to make him be Jim Gordon. So even if he doesn't have any lines that he's focusing on his race, it's still tokenization nonetheless. And considering that comic books are a visual medium, it's perfectly rational for someone to look at that and have a problem with it.
And I think you mentioned this earlier too, but comic books definitely have, I guess, in your view, has taken their share of tokenism as well, right? In a lot of their reboots, they changed up the characters. Do you find issues with that as well?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I would argue most of the stuff that I talk about regarding tokenism has been in the comic books. I don't, and historically what they've been. Now, I have said before, and I will repeat this, like not all tokenism is, let's say, equal, right? There are some that I think are worse than others. Some are more goofier than others, but there's some that are more They're better characters. Let's say I've said She-Hulk. I've talked about Supergirl, and now in my video, it was like 15 minutes long. I did like a real thorough breakdown of the concept of tokenism, and I talked specifically about those two characters. And how, they may be tokenized character, but they're the better handled tokenized character. So absolutely, I talk about it in the books.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like I'm just coming from the camp that from as long as a character standpoint, and I guess maybe I'm not so focused onto the visual aspect. Like, yes, I love, and I've obviously read the comics like that, but I guess I'm just more centered on the characters feel the same. The characters read the same and they act the same. I don't really see an issue with the changing of, or an issue of the tokenism there, especially if the character stays true to what was originally written. And I believe, and again, I haven't seen the movie, so that's why I believe Jim Gordon's a good example of that. While he doesn't look exactly the same as his,
he doesn't look anything like him. Like it's not even close. It's not even. But again, you don't think that that's something that. Well, I get it from your perspective. And that sounds like that's what it is that you're talking about. And you're saying that that's not anything you particularly care about. But if we look at, be it folks like myself or any other person who looks at that, would you at least agree that that's a rational thing for something that is as visual of a medium as comic books, for someone to take issue when the character doesn't look anything like their comic book counterpart?
I mean, I think, and like we said, all of this, again, is subjective just because of the medium, right? So so I do think that's valid for you to have that reaction saying, oh, if you are that hyper visual person where you need to see the same person in the same interpretation, the same iteration from screen to comic book or comic book to screen, that's fine. But then I feel like at that point too, you have to then take a step back and be like, yeah, this is obviously subjective, and even his review was subjective as well. So that's why I didn't take much issue to it. I'm like, it's just this one guy's review on it, and it's hard to just have a general critique over that film, right? Because everyone has their own opinions on it. That's why I keep saying it's in my opinion that I do. I think it's just weird that he's hyper-focused on that. So I will say that it's not weird for him to have that opinion. It's just I feel that it's weird in order to then docket however many points or whatnot. It seems a little weird from my opinion. And that's why I just keep saying, going back to I don't need that. You may need that. That's fine. And it's your own opinion. I would never tell you to kill yourself, or I would never want you to die for your own opinion. And that's why I think we can at least go back to agreeing on whoever's been saying those kind of stuff. It's very cringe. Don't do that.
Okay.
It's just going back to them saying it's the tokenism. I think we're just coming back to that. I guess that's just from where everyone else is coming from. It's just their own opinion on that. And I guess this might be one of those situations where we're agree to disagree, but I guess that's where we're at now.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously all this stuff is opinions, and definitely with reviews and all that stuff is subjective. Again, I think the problem here is that you have, and I don't want to lose sight of that. What you have is, despite they may be in a loud minority, taking issue with something which I've said is a mild statement that was very mild to Ryan's taste and other things that he said.
No, yeah, it was low to mid. It was a low to mid.
Yeah, it was. It was just. It wasn't even like that big. But again, when you look at how they reacted, even to the people that weren't calling for his death, and the people that were just calling him such egregious terms, and this isn't me like being overly defensive of. I'm just looking at this objectively. That's nutcase shit. You know what I mean? Like that's people reacting irrationally, no matter if we may think, oh, some of them are not mad or whatever, or they're just typing it and laughing at,
sure,
whatever it doesn't take, if we're going to sit up here and talk about take from that in terms of the response, I think is not only completely unwarranted, it's objectively stupid considering what it is that he said and how mild that it was. And that is why this whole ordeal even happened. He said something and they took a clip, 30 seconds or whatever in his review. and they acted as if, and yeah, he might have docked it, or that was something worth noting that he may have had a problem with, but it was a mild take. And it doesn't, when you go immediately start assuming someone is part of the KKK or something, or he's racist or all that other dumb shit simply because of that mild take. I think the issue here isn't with Ryan on that regards. It's with their response. We can disagree. And again, it's Ryan, dude. Ryan's not going to have any problem with anybody disagreeing with him. Hell, me and him scream at each other every Tuesday, and every time we play Mario Kart, like, we're yelling at him, calling him all kinds of fucking names. I mean, it is what it is. But that was that's unwarranted from such a mild take, which was my only thing that I was saying. Like, the hell, these people are getting that bit out of shape like that for such a mild take. Come on, man.
Yeah. Those people definitely are getting bent out of shape, and I agree with that. But then we can't also then ignore the rational people who were having a rational discussion about
I haven't seen. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Problematic. Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I have rarely seen that from these takes. That we've been talking about, I have rarely seen rational takes in this regard. This is why I think that, hell, especially when you consider the guy that you're responding to who made an objectively false claim, like this Jordan cat. He makes an objectively false claim, can't prove it, and then you had nerve to say that I deflected from it. But really, all of this stuff stemmed from this one guy calling him like really a very egregious sort of turn. Again, that's the problem isn't with Ryan on that case. That's with the other people that are making the claims it is that they are making. And I think it is irrational. For example, with the guy that you co-signed, this Jordan cat, who literally lied. Like, he said that I'd be calling someone racist for having such a mid take. There is no evidence of me ever doing that. Ever. There's no receipt of me ever doing anything mildly like that. Such a weird thing to suggest.
Again, we're coming back from Twitter. It's also Twitter. So I don't know if wanting like receipts on Twitter is ever going to lead to a good conversation. They're not.
Why? Why? I think for a person that's as public as me, that should be the easiest thing to do. Because he said anyone else, you'd be called. He's specifically talking about me. I'm not a guy that is, just a Twitter normie, shit posting. I have public. I do a daily show. There are 3 videos that get released essentially every day on my YouTube. If someone makes a false claim as egregious, they should easily be able to, or if it wasn't a claim, a false one, and it wasn't egregious, they should be able to point to that and say, well, you said this before, or even in general terms. And he couldn't do it because it was a bullshit term and he made it up. He completely pulled it out of that.
Or he was probably a bot.
That was the point. That was the point that I was making. This is the point that I was making. But you co-signed it. That's my thing.
Oh no, I'm saying I wouldn't give the bot light of day because he's probably just a bot with like 2 followers or something. So asking a bot, it's like asking a wall.
Which you may be correct on that, but you co-signed it though. You may be correct on that, but you co-signed it.
Could you be more specific on
co-signing? All right, co-signing again. You said that you said I was deflecting it. Yeah, so you agree with that statement in terms of him him making a claim that I'm deflecting it or something. You say he deflecting it, and I'm looking at the comment. Certainly, right now you're talking about I've yet to answer his. I'm using debate lord tactics, and I've yet to answer his questions. I'm like, what have I not answered? Yeah. What have I not answered? And why is it that you defend that as opposed to simple statement? Show the receipts. Show the receipts, and he didn't have them. You would think even if you thought he was mildly a bot. Now, I don't know if it was because his opinion is more in line with y'all, but if you thought he was a bot, it sounds like you'd be going at him, not me.
I would say definitely because of the fact that a lot of the times, and I was reading through the threads or like the numerous threads with the original retweet battle you were having with somebody else, that a lot of the times it was just the debate lord tactic I was talking about. I think you commented on another reply of mine that said, "Oh, this is a quote unquote a debate lord tactic," where it's like you're not addressing, even though it could be a bot or something, you're not addressing what the question was asked or what the topic was. You're simply asking for receipts for something else to back it up there, instead of just taking the 2 seconds to still prove that person wrong. And
why? No. See,
right.
that's an error. Why would I try to prove someone wrong if their premise is a false their premise is based upon a false statement. Why am I required to try to defend myself or prove them wrong in that regard?
You're not. It's Twitter.
No, I don't care if it wasn't Twitter. Like, let's say if it was a live Oxford even debate or just a rational conversation. Why am I required to attempt to defend myself? Huh?
That context does matter, whether or not you're having it on Twitter or you're having an Oxford debate. Because in an Oxford debate, the two people would have probably done research and brought the facts into play and brought like the screenshots, the receipts there. But because it's on Twitter, it's just a normie commenting on it. The guy's not to expect the guy to come with a 20-page report.
It doesn't need to be a 20-page report to sit up here and say, even in general terms, you have said this, therefore this would be your conclusion. That is such a simple thing.
Yeah.
Why would I? But again, even if it's on Twitter, even if it's just you and me having a conversation, why on earth am I required to address something that is based upon a faulty statement, and as opposed to just saying, how about this? Before we even move along, you prove what it is upon what your statement operates as if it was true. You don't think that's just a simple thing to do? I do it. I'm just saying.
I was coming back from a holistic view of of all the sort of threads you were talking about. That's where I was coming from. Like, oh yeah, he seems to be sidestepping a lot of these other conversations or a lot of these replies or discussions to just say, oh, he's, what was something that you said? Oh, somebody misread him, somebody didn't understand what you were saying. And so, okay, well, or you misinterpreted something. And a lot of that times, like, oh, okay, well, that is, while I don't think I used the term deflecting, that is definitely a debate lord tactic in which you're just,
no, you for sure use the term deflect. You for sure use the term deflect. You said you deflect based off of meaningless debate lord tactics. It's literally what you said.
Okay, then I did use deflect, and I'm sorry for that. But again, that is also just those points of it's just a sidestep from addressing the actual topic, which was the original of your friend of making the controversial point.
Well, again,
instead when he could have just said,
okay, go. No, finish. Why don't you finish your statement?
No, I was just reiterating the fact where you could have just spent the 2 seconds to address it, even though it was a bot, because you put yourself in the replying portion, so that because you replied to a person, whether it was a bot or a brick wall or something, you replied, so that means that you not didn't instigate it, but you definitely gave it attention. So rather than that, if you were going to give it attention at all, you might as well have just answered it in order to just stop it from there, because maybe it would have also changed their mind.
That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. A guy, because all I did, and I'll take you through the series of events. I posted basically a link to a segment of the show in which we talked about these reactions are the fact that it elicited this sort of response is based upon a mild statement, was bizarre, weird, or whatever. He said, the person that you're talking about said, you're only standing up for him, which again, it was just me saying, oh, it's a mild statement. You're only standing up for him because he's your boy. Anyone else, you'd be calling them racist. There's only 2 sentences there. I said, well, if that's your position, because it operates upon a faulty statement that is completely false. I know it's completely false. I say, you've got the wrong guy. And he had, at no point in time, he show, and I asked him, okay, since you made it a claim, your first comment, man, is based upon a claim that is it's a pretty big deal, because what you're trying to point to is that I'm a hypocrite in some way, or I'm contradicting myself in some way. Yes, it is absolutely on that man, woman, they, them, whatever, to sit there and show the receipts of what their claim is. I am under no requirement to sit there and either defend myself from a claim that I know is false. I'm under no requirement to sit up there and do that if I know for a fact that claim is a false one. But if it wasn't, he should be able to show the receipts, because the original statement was specifically trying to paint it as I'm some sort of hypocrite and I'm doing something out of pocket. So yes, I don't care where it's at. Like I've said, I was just using that on scale, be it on Twitter, be it on the Oxford debate, whatever it is. Sure. It is perfectly rational. And it makes all the sense in the world. If you're going to make a positive claim about someone, you should be able to provide the receipts, even if it's in a general statement. If he's someone, he made a claim that he's been following me. So even if it's a general statement, he should be able to say, well, and when you do these types of videos, you generally say this. So I've seen you talk about he couldn't even do that. Why? Because it was a false statement. So why would I defend myself from that? And why would I not just say, show the receipts?
Whether it be rational, I just don't think that it's realistic, or at least either I don't think it's realistic, and if you think it is realistic, I don't think you've been on Twitter for that long, or I think you haven't been on the internet for that long. And I know you have. I'm just making an exaggeration to make a point, sort of thing. That's not how internet work. That's not how the debates there, or even the discussions work there, because people, it's like you said, people hide behind their screen. So they're not going to have that. So in order to ask that, it's just kind of weird. I'm like, oh, this guy did on Twitter. This guy will never reply with the receipts. Rather, you should do something that he probably will do, which is react to.
That's stupid. That's me dumbing the conversation down to go on his. That doesn't make sense, man. You're telling me to completely ignore the egregious claim. You're telling me to completely ignore that because he might be a shit poster or something like that, and not expect them to have a receipt. And again, that person ends up looking like a dumbass.
If you're going to reply to a shit post,
I didn't know he was a shit poster. I didn't know he was a shit poster at all. This is why I simply asked, show the receipt. Okay, well, I will say the vast majority of Twitter, which is why I made the call out in the first place, don't know what the fuck that is that they're talking about. This is why I say that this shit should not be taken seriously. We have a guy, objectively, who had no idea what the fuck he was talking about. He made an objectively false claim. He couldn't provide any sort of receipt, even that is not he's doing it. We're doing it with Ryan's video where he's not actually quoting what anything Ryan said. So how on earth can he do it with Ryan, but he can't do it with my material?
Again, I think you just have unrealistic expectations.
How is that? All right, how's the expectation unrealistic when the literal topic of conversation, which is Ryan's video, he's somehow able to point to it and reference it, but he can't do it with my material?
Because he's someone hiding behind a screen on Twitter, So he will have. That's what I'm saying. I think it's stupid for sure. But if you're going to reply to that, it's sort of the situation like if you already replied, you lost. Sort of thing, just because you stoop down to their level already.
No, it's stooping down to that level is what you wanted me to do. That's exactly what you wanted me to do. You wanted me to stoop down to his level. That's literally what you
already
said.
At his level by replying.
No. You wanted me to completely ignore all of that and just to reply to something that he will reply to. That's literally stooping down to his level. That's why the whole frustration happened, because I wouldn't do that.
If you were already going to stoop down to his level, you might as well go.
But I didn't see myself. I'm not stooping down to his level though. All I'm doing is saying you got the wrong guy.
Anyone that gives. To give attention to the shit poster, to give attention to.
I didn't know he was a shit poster. I have no idea. I did not know he's a shit poster. This is a guy who made a claim that was 2 basic sentences, and if all he was a shit poster, and we found that after the fact, then that's it. But I'm not shit posting. I don't do that shit. So I'm not stooping down to his level. I don't do that shit. That's for losers. That's suckers that hide behind computer screens and call people egregious claims, knowing goddamn well none of these guys would ever do that. This is why I even made the post saying, "Look, man, it's Twitter. Nobody should take this serious and get bent out of shape." But they get, it's not real life. Number one, nobody on this is gonna whoop my ass. That's first and foremost. And number two, it's like most people are completely incapable, as we showed. And people are completely incapable of actually handling themselves in some sort of live dialogue, which is why they stoop down to where it is that they are on getting mad and calling people egregious shit on the Twitterverse. So I don't think I think it's being unfair when you say that I'm stooping down to some shit. I would never lower myself to such standards. Never do that. I never do that.
No, I don't think you should. But I do think that it may be a little bit of a weird take at that point. And I know you said you didn't know that this guy was a shit poster, but at this point of the game, and this point in all the threads and all the boards, the replies you're going to get are either your fans or they're going to be shit posters. And you may
go in between. Well, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Maybe again, all these people that are saying what it is, they're saying that we did the videos on, and we talked about regarding mild takes, or Ryan's mild takes, are just retarded shit posters. I think I can agree to that.
And that's the point where I was saying, like, it's a loud majority. It's a loud majority because the people that disagree, like myself, like I didn't disagree. I didn't agree with him completely, right? I didn't agree with what he was saying. I thought he was definitely saying controversial stuff, but I didn't also feel the need to post those egregious things. So
okay,
I understand, and it's good content, right? It's good content. I will agree with that. Like, especially it's like, oh yeah, well, like all the angry shit posters that have no sense of like social skills that will reply those egregious things. Yeah, let's make some great content out of that. Let's get some clickbait titles and everything. That's fine, but like at some point we have to then step back and say, okay, these definitely also are shit posters, and to give them attention is just probably giving them what they want. First of all,
I don't know.
Second
I mean,
of all,
maybe it is. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I mean, but I do think a lot of these guys, as we've proven time and time again, a lot of these guys are just emboldened by the nature of what Twitter is and what it allows you to do behind sock accounts. But I don't think, and I've had people like this on my show before, that we've ended up, be it in YouTube comments or Twitter or whatever, and they come on making themselves look like complete jackasses because they completely overestimated their own intelligence. So I think it's a mix of people that are doing it purposefully, but I also think you have the other side of people who are just flat out fucking retarded, and this is just how they react. And the only difference between Twitter and real life is that there's no social ramifications for acting that way. So that Twitter gives them the outlet to do it. I think, yeah, they're not that intelligent to be just simple shit posts. I think some of these guys are actually retarded. I think seriously, I believe that, and I think we proved that. Everything. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree on everything. Then I would agree. I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
A lot of the times, then the replies can equally be as damning. So
yeah, sometimes
everyone in the all of the fans also can be shit posters too. Basically, if you're on Twitter, a lot of the time, most of the time, you shit posted in the time, right? But
you're talking about people on Twitter? Okay, fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, just like I'm not saying you specifically.
Okay.
Like, at some point, the majority of them have been known to shit post, right?
Okay.
But and then now that we talked about that, I say we just go circle it back, right? Because I'm thinking a lot of the times that there's truth in some of those shit posters, right? So, and that's what I'm talking about, the loud minority, because while they were definitely egregious and they were shit posting for sure, there's truth in what their anger was pointed at. Because I mean, the controversy is still, at the end of the day, controversy, and whether it's a 10-second clip or it's way more racist takes from somebody else, we can't ignore that. So while I wish people had been less egregious and definitely more contained in their reactions to this, at least then it's us having a conversation about it, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And to say to the conversation, we need to go back to the critique about it, how it still is a controversial take. It still is, while it's mid, it's still something to talk about, saying this should not have been that much of an issue. And we need to think about why society is still fixed up on this sort of take, that even if the Hollywood machine is being too woke, it shouldn't be this much of an issue for you to see a racial switch if the characters are true to their originality, right? And that's where I'm coming from. I know you disagree with that, and that's where I'm saying this may be the point where we just agree to disagree.
Well, I'm okay with it certainly on that note. I mean, but my thing is, and I think it's important that this isn't even a controversy per se, if it was merely just a critique of what Ryan had said. So while I will agree that some people may have issue with it, I think this conversation doesn't even happen if all we're dealing with is people that took just an issue with it and stated it, or they thought that it was truth, some sort of truth or that there was some sort of truth in what it was that it is that they were saying in their criticism. But that's not at all what it is that we're dealing with. We're dealing with people for the most part, and this is why it's a controversy in the first place. People that are reacting by calling the man and saying that he's associated with, and other people around him, the Ku Klux fucking Klan, simply because he acknowledged the demographics of what happened in the movie or what the movie was.
Again, but we're getting back to the point where we already discussed with the loud minority. If I could bring up a specific point that one of the tweets that I replied to, that I think you also replied to, was that I never heard of this guy. To be fair, I've never heard of you either, and that's not a slight. I'm just not an internet person that much. Okay. But there was a retweet reply with like somebody called like Task or something. The one with the anime.
Oh yeah, the guy that we called to try to get on the show and his bitch ass suck it out. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. He's a hoe.
The guy was like the Infinity Gauntlet in his face.
Yeah, the
right?
hoe.
Something
Yeah, the hoe. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I remember him first quote tweeting the original point with like a joke about the guy not having eyebrows. Right? I'm like, funny, sure, whatever. Like, and so at that point, then that's where I feel like the most got out of hand. And or like, it was just like, okay, now we're just going back and we're not talking about the real thing, but now we're highlighting a non-threatening quote tweet just because the guy talked about eyebrows. And so I think when you say that they were all just egregious replies, that specifically was like, that's an instance where it wasn't egregious. It was just a joke. Like,
well, no, but again, that's what I'm talking about is regarding why this is a thing, this whole ordeal in the conversation. Like even that's a ad hominem, by the way. So it wasn't an argument because he's hostile on people's eyebrows or something. And I think if you're if I'm thinking about the tweet, he quote tweeted me, in which I said nothing about any of that shit. And this is why I asked him, like, why the fuck are you quote tweeting me or talking about this man's eyebrows? I think it's kind of homosexual, to be honest, but that's neither here nor there. If that's what floats his boat, right, that's what floats his boat. But either way, that ain't got nothing to do with me. That ain't got nothing to do with me. He quote tweeted me saying exactly that, which is an ad hominem. So even to the original point, that's still goofy shit and making a weird reaction to such a mild statement. It's all stems from that mild statement. And he's going on about eyebrows and shit. You know, like this is that.
It was a joke first.
Yeah, I know it's a joke. I'm not denying that. But out of that, it was the same guy calling people, associating people with sort of racism, calling me all kinds of coons and Uncle Toms and all kinds of shit. It's the same dude from the same conversation. So from that, we're getting a bunch of reactional folks.
Pat called you a coon?
Yes.
Pat called you a coon?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I don't know the conversations. Do you have the tweet to pull it up?
I will pull it up right now. I know he's deleted. We're looking at it right now. I know he's deleted. I know he's deleted a lot of his posts. Like this. Let me see. Hold up. Scrolling down. Yeah. He called. And this one he calls me a bitch ass. This is the one that he deleted. So I know he called me a coon in that one and wanted to do that. Here's one where he's trying to associate me. What was this? Django Unchained, associating me. We're looking at it right now with a GIF. He said Eric July, whenever one of his white homies getting, basically again calling me because what that character was a literal house nigga. That's what he's calling me. He says I have a fetish for defending racist white dudes. Yeah, the guy called me all sorts of names. One of them got deleted because he's a pussy, but the one that was most egregious, he deleted out. Hopefully, we can get someone to screenshot that because I know the internet is forever. So to your question, yes, he's called me all kinds of shit.
I would say, yeah, I would say if the other parts, the other portions, or the other retweets was definitely not like egregious. I wouldn't say if he called you a coon, yeah, for sure. But the other part was like the fetish thing. I mean, that was just a reply to your reply. Right. I feel like you started with the eyebrow fetish.
Well, no, I would say, saying that I'm defending racist white dudes, I would absolutely call that egregious because I did no such thing. I know people like to throw that term just around just so loosely, but yeah, that's kind of fucked up.
Okay, well, so there's a lot that you're grouping into egregious, right? There's death
not really. No. When you associate, I think being an actual literal racist is one of the worst fucking things that you can be.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
So, I would agree with that.
Okay, so that's egregious.
But okay. You're thinking it's egregious for defending racist white dudes, but so
no, I think it's egregious for claiming that that I'm doing. Absolutely. If it's not the worst, if it's not one of the worst things that you could do, if it's not one of the worst things you could be, how would that not be egregious?
I mean, there's a different term, or there's a different level, and I would believe, for whether or not he's calling you that. Which I feel like I can't see the Twitter, I can't see the feed.
Oh, by the way, we are looking at it. A big shout out to My Nerdy Home and everybody that did get it. He literally did call me a coon. He said we're looking at the same task guy that you're talking about. We have the deleted tweet. He said you can't summon me, coon. That's literally what he said. And then he called me a house Negro in the same tweet, in the same goddamn tweet.
Yeah, I mean that's egregious.
Okay.
Oh yeah, then that's just egregious. Like I don't know where people think that's just okay to say, but sure. Like,
all right. See, this is why you got to get the receipts. That's why receipts are so important to even conversations on Twitter. It's so important because we can at least see and understand what it is where it is that people are coming from. We can't just accept people's word for shit. We can't do it. That's where we fuck up. But I will say this. I agree in the fact that someone can point to it is that what someone says, let's say in this case Ryan, and have a valid, legitimate criticism. I want to make it abundantly clear that I'm not stating that doesn't exist. I'm not saying that you are. I'm just saying that that's a valid thing for someone to do. In the same respects, this doesn't become a controversy if that's all that people were doing. I know the type of guy Ryan is, certainly, and obviously everybody that he's associated with, it ain't a big deal. We do this all the time. We take issue with what someone says. Someone does a video, like whatever, but that's not what happened. If it was all that happened, I don't think we're dealing with a controversy at all. But in fact, we have what people are doing, like this task fucking idiot, and associating people with such foul fucking things, and that's why it's one of a controversial thing. And again, I want to be fair. I'm not stating.
And that just becomes.
Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say that just comes from a whole different conversation of than just cancel culture or that whole online culture to begin with. So
okay,
it's hard to give actual critique online.
I don't disagree with that. On Twitter especially, I would I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, if I were to have it my way, I feel like everyone should be able to keep a level head and give the honest critique, which I feel like is justified in that sense.
Okay.
And if I were to have a conversation ever with Ryan, I believe is his name, I would give him that critique, and I hope he gives me a platform to listen to it. But I'm just a nobody, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
It's just I would give him that critique, and I feel like if he's able to take that critique to heart and actually ponder on it, then I feel like then that's all it needed to be. That's all it needs to be.
Okay.
There doesn't need to be a big blow up.
I agree.
There doesn't need. I also don't think he's canceled in any way because this will all blow over in a day.
Yeah. I would agree with that as well. Yep.
So that's what I'm saying. I just think this gets in the way for true critique, and so it will never allow people to actually move forward and get the constructive criticism they need when it comes to this take. If I was right there in the moment, I'm like, whoa, that's probably not the best thing to say right now. Let's think of a different way to say that.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that. I don't think Ryan would have a problem with just a basic critique. I don't think that anybody, certainly on our side, I mean, we're built for that shit. So I don't think anybody has a problem with that. We may can get some content out of it. We may can have a nice little conversation that's going to be something that's going to be valuable for the audience.
Yeah, I think that's way more true. And I think everyone is, and I think the shit posters and the trolls are on both sides, including your fans and the chat. If they want to stay true to the criticism, right? let's stay true to the criticism and let's not actually just shitpost onto them, because being just egregious and having those hurtful words isn't going to help anybody.
Okay.
So and so let's make room in this world for actual honest critique, and that way people can actually progress.
Okay. Yeah. I have no problem with it. I think often what happens is that, yeah, and I've said it before, if you go there, I'm going to go there. But if we can stay where we're at, and if it's just going to be an honest, level-headed critique, then let's stay there. But in the same respects, if people take it to where they take it to, yeah, I mean, I'm under no requirement to, I would never project my set of morals or ethics onto someone if I know they're not going to abide by them. That's a recipe for disaster, and certainly a recipe for that's just a mistake. It's all around mistake. So yeah, if it's about that, then yeah, I agree. Let's keep it about that. Now, if it goes somewhere else because someone took it there, we take it there too. But yeah, it should be. And I think if that were the case, it wouldn't be much of a controversy. It should be just, complete direct line of sight. So I give you that.
No, and I agree too.
Perfect.
I think great conversation.
I agree.
Thank you for having me on the show. I don't know if you wanted to discuss anything else. I'm more than happy to.
No, if you don't have anything, I'm good to go. Like I've said, I appreciate you, everybody that ever comes on, no matter where it is that they're at. On any given subject, I appreciate them coming on the show. So if you don't have anything, I'm good to go.
Yeah, man. I have a meeting that I have to be heading up to in like 20 minutes. So I got to prepare for that. So
sounds good, man. Well, again, man, I appreciate you joining us.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Take it easy.
Yeah, you have a good one.
Yeah. All right. Big shout out to My Nerdy Home, and big shout out to everybody that was able to give me the screenshot of his deleted tweet. But like I've said, the receipts are important, guys. And if there's a lesson to be learned from this, not only do you keep them, but I talk about how you handle people, right? And this isn't even necessarily referring to Andrew here, who we were just talking to anybody for that matter. You are under no requirement, and it's important that you remember this. I don't care what medium that you're on. You are under no requirement to sit there and take and operate as if their comment is true. When someone immediately, with their first initial statements, is operating upon a direct falsehood, tell them to show the receipts. It works almost every time. And if they can't show it, then at that point, make fun of them, because you've given them the opportunity to do it. I always refer back to that one conversation where we had a real live Twitter meltdown from some chick with a big following who called me a transphobe. And I'm like, interesting. And I continue on like nothing happened. You know why? Because it was a false statement. Now, what that person generally wants you to do, and this is how generally the social justice left operates, is that they want you to get on the defense, because that allows them to not have to atone or answer to anything it is that they said. The mistake that a lot of people go in with is assuming that their opponent is honest. So when they say something that's foul, you just operate with it and try to get on the defense. Say, well, no, why would you say that? I'm not that. No, don't do that. Say, hey, show the receipts. Show the receipts. Prove it. And if you can't prove it, I'm not even addressing that dumb shit. That's how you deal with those types in any given circle. Do not find yourself being on the defense from a claim that you know is fucking false, because 9 times out of 9, they can't prove it. Like when you go and call someone something that is very foul like that, like something just so fucked up, yeah, you should have to answer to that. And if you're not prepared to do that, then that's fine. But, you know, to my point earlier, like that I had when we talk about this whole racism shit, I'm not a guy that obsesses over it. I might think you're an asshole for being that way, but I'm not a guy that's fucking like gonna get bent out of shape for like in racism in the context of like I will let that shit control my life. Like a lot of people unfortunately do. I wouldn't do that. I'm not interested in that. You know what I mean? I'm just not interested in that. But don't get it twisted. You're an asshole. So when you try to basically associate someone else with that type of shit, you're essentially calling them an asshole. It's one for you to keep that shit over there. But when you bringing it in my territory, we got problems, man. But it ain't nothing that like, you know, I'm gonna fucking lose some sleep over. And it certainly ain't nothing that I'm gonna fucking have an aneurysm over because someone says some racist shit. Like, no, it's like definitely on the internet. Like, cause again, none of y'all gonna whoop my ass. So, but on a serious note, guys, keep the receipts. And if your opponent or someone that's making some or saying something bad about you can't provide them, at that point they only deserve mock and shame because that person has now told you that they're going to go out of their way and make you appear to be something that you know that you're not and that they know that you're not and they can't prove it, but they need for that shit to be true. So they're operating as if it is. No. That point, they deserve only mock and shame. That's it. They only deserve mock and shame.
You just listened to a clip from my podcast, For Canon's Sake, which is live throughout the week at 12 p.m. Central on youtube.com/YoungRipper59 and odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. Be sure to check out my website, ericdjuly.com, so you can stay up to date with everything it is that I'm doing. You can also become a member and get access to a bunch of cool perks and exclusive content, which includes a social media hub where you can interact with myself and other members. It even has an app that you can get, which is now live in the Google and Apple stores.